sanglots longs des violons de l'automne. Je répète.
The great book of courage and fear was written on these Normandy beaches on June 6, 1944. Here, 3 million Allied soldiers landed or fell from the sky to free Europe from Nazi oppression. Anne-Marie Desquet lived on this beach. The Allies were there, so she smiled, despite the danger. She recalls, "Our dog is terrified. Cannons are being fired. Planes are flying overhead." Henri Boujat was a child. He remembers. The D-Day landings were hailed as a relief and a terrible misfortune. War had reached our shores. For the men who landed in Normandy and soon in Provence, and for the whole of France, this is a summer of the apocalypse. How did the Allies prepare for these gigantic campaigns? And how did the Germans organize their defenses? For all concerned, this will be the great challenge. Since 1938, Hitler has tormented Europe, claiming, like other dictators, that he is the victim of a war he himself caused. In July 1943, he still controls part of Russia, known at the time as the Soviet Union. But since his defeat in the Battle of Kursk, he is on the defensive. His enemies, the so-called Big Three, meet in Tehran in November 1943. Stalin, master of the Kremlin, gets together with US President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill to prepare a new Western Front to relieve the pressure in the East. Churchill sought to impose his idea of landing in the Balkans, which he called Europe's soft underbelly, to take Berlin before the Russians. Stalin opposed this idea, as did the Americans, so the plan became land in Normandy, then in Provence, to meet up in Dijon, and encircle the German army. Everything began 1 year earlier in French North Africa, with the Allies' first significant landing, General Eisenhower in command. Dwight D. Eisenhower is 54. Born into a modest family of German immigrants, he was accepted at the prestigious West Point Military Academy. This armored officer proves to be a brilliant organizer and diplomat. History will remember him. In 1942, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia were still in the hands of Marshal Pétain and Admiral Dallon, who had established a policy of collaboration with Hitler. On November 8, 1942, when the Allies landed in North Africa, they didn't hesitate to issue orders to open fire. 3 days of fighting left 2,000 dead, most of them French. Yet following his victory, Eisenhower kept Admiral Darlan in power. A pragmatist, he explained to Roosevelt, "I understand your surprise, but without a strong French government in place here, we would be forced into full military occupation, which would cost us dearly in time and resources." But Darlan was assassinated by a French resistance fighter on Christmas Day, 1942. Roosevelt replaced him with General Henri Giraud, a leading light of the French army, with the intent to sideline General de Gaulle in exile in London. Roosevelt didn't like de Gaulle, whom he saw as a potential dictator, yet Churchill supported him. After complex negotiations, Giraud and de Gaulle shared interim control over liberated North Africa. In Algiers in June 1943, the two rivals present the new African army to King George VI of England. It is being re-equipped and rearmed by the Allies. The troops prepare to return to combat with the Pieds Noirs, the Moroccan Goumiers, the Algerian infantrymen, and numerous African troops, often enlisted by force or seduced by the salary and prestige of the uniform. Soon, they will land in Provence to liberate France. After North Africa, the Allies set their sights on Sicily. First, they devised an extraordinary disinformation campaign to mislead the Germans. In London, MI5, Britain's counter-espionage agency, comes up with the mincemeat plan. British secret agents recover a body from the morgue, make it look presentable, and dress it up as a staff officer. They take him on board a submarine and throw him into the water off the coast of Spain. He has a new identity in his pocket, Major William Martin, along with a military career, a fiancée, and a wealth of details. And the essential item, attached to his wrist, a briefcase containing plans in indelible ink for a fake Allied landing in Greece and Sardinia. The tide will do the rest. The body is found by Spanish fishermen on April 30th, 1943. The documents reach the Germans, who study them and deem them credible. This leads General Jodl to convince Hitler that a landing will take place in Greece, so the troops are sent there. But the German soldiers spend their time sightseeing. Operation Mincemeat is a success. The coast is clear. On July 9th, 1943, the Allies are able to land in Sicily without significant casualties. The 7th U.S. Army's Film Department features its leader, the best known and most controversial general of the day, Patton. George Patton, 58, is a leader of men and a remarkable tactician. A historian of Caesar and Napoleon, a great Francophile, he is extravagant, wearing his 1911 Colt 45 revolver on his belt, Wild West style. The ivory grip is engraved with his initials. His bull terrier, Willie, is by his side for every battle. Patton is famous for his outspokenness. He tells his soldiers, "The object of war is not to die for your country, but to make the other die for his." Patton is often hard to control. He slaps a shell-shocked soldier in the face. It's an outrage. He's relieved of his command. Roosevelt appoints Eisenhower to command all Allied forces in Europe. On December 6, 1943, he moves to London to plan from England Operation Overlord, the landing in France.
I am highly gratified that my command is still an Allied one. The past year has seen a tremendous advance in our progress toward final victory. On the Russian front, the great and gallant Red Army have made tremendous inroads against the Nazis. I have complete confidence that the soldiers, sailors, and airmen, and all the civil populations of the United Nations will demonstrate once and for all that an aroused democracy is the most formidable fighting machine that can be devised.
Neutral countries like Sweden pass these newsreels to the Germans. Eisenhower continues feeding false intel. He indicates the Bordeaux region, whereas in Tehran, the Big Three decided that the landing would occur between Cherbourg and Le Havre. Broad beaches large enough to accommodate an immense fleet for what will be the most extensive amphibious operation in history. Eisenhower chairs the Inter-Allied Chiefs of Staff because America provides funding and weapons for the operation. For diplomatic reasons, he is surrounded by two renowned British generals. General Bernard Montgomery, 57, will command the D-Day land forces. Victorious over the Germans in the Battle of the Desert, he's known to be difficult and reluctant to cooperate. And then there's Royal Air Force General Arthur Tedder, 54, in his iconic leather flight jacket. For Montgomery, Tedder is in cahoots with the Americans. He was with Eisenhower in Sicily. Tedder hates their complicity. Eisenhower will have to call upon his legendary diplomatic skills. Montgomery will say privately, "We have the brains and the Americans have the brawn." For Eisenhower, the job is a complicated one. The world's fate rests upon his shoulders. In early 1944, Hitler is at the Wolf's Lair, his headquarters in the East. The mood is glum. Hitler often has himself filmed decorating war heroes. He tries to galvanize his troops after 5 years of war, like with these submarine commanders, the last survivors of the Battle of the Atlantic. The German people are worried, and many officers are unhappy. Several assassination attempts have failed, and Hitler now only goes out to attend the many funerals the war has brought on. To prepare everyone for what Hitler calls the invasion, he proclaimed in his latest directive, "We have been moved to extremes in the fight against Bolshevism, but nothing can mortally damage the German lifeline." Closer to home, a greater danger threatens us, the Anglo-Saxon landing. Should the enemy succeed in penetrating the West, the consequences would be incalculable. In the English ports, over 2 million soldiers joined the British forces. Americans, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, along with French, Poles, Czechs, Norwegians, Belgians, and Greeks. The Americans arrive in England on liners converted for troop transport. The Liberty ships. They make up 3/4 of the Allied forces. The African Americans are separated from the others. 100,000 strong. They are subjected to the segregation in effect in the United States at the time. "100,000 women are enlisted in the army as nurses or auxiliaries. One of them tries to reassure these young Americans with donuts, one of their favorite foods. Private Tom Burchella is troubled. He is a devout Christian and wonders, will I be able to kill a man? Most haven't yet asked themselves this question. They're GIs, which stands for galvanized iron, like their equipment and morale. These millions of soldiers will live in 700,000 tents. They will consume 100,000 tons of potatoes, 200 million liters of beer, and a stock of 15 million condoms. The Americans are an instant hit. Laura Knight, 19, is one of 75,000 young English women to marry a GI. She says, "They were magnificent, with big pockets full of chewing gum. "350,000 vehicles, tanks, trucks, jeeps have crossed the Atlantic to invade the roads and fields of the English countryside, shaking up traditions across 500 kilometers. 10,000 ships of all sizes, manned by 200,000 sailors, pile into the ports of southern England. They will be loaded with 25 million tons of food, equipment, and fuel. Each division will consume 100,000 liters of gasoline per day once in France. Therefore, an ultra-secret underwater pipeline is put into place to be rolled out across the English Channel. On the southern west coast of England, in Woolacombe, the Allies build a giant secret assault training center. On February 19, 1944, a Soviet delegation arrives, led by Admiral Kharlamov, a master spy. Surprised by the damp, cold weather in this part of England, the Russians are equipped with warm US Navy jackets. Admiral Kharlamov visits the landing barges and confirms that Stalin is preparing a major offensive in the east to prevent the Germans from sending reinforcements to Normandy when the time comes. The Russians discover some unusual inventions, including the floating tank, the duplex with propellers to move through the water, and the crab, designed to destroy beach mines. Much of this new amphibious equipment is a result of lessons learned during the catastrophic Allied landing in France 2 years earlier, an attempt to seize the port of Dieppe on August 19, 1942. It cost them 2 Canadian divisions, British commandos, American Rangers, and a handful of Free Frenchmen. In the fierce air battle over Dieppe, pilots of all nationalities continued to fight next to the Royal Air Force. One of them is shot down, a Belgian, Count Yvan de Monceau de Bergendal. He is rescued by Royal Navy sailors and returns to combat until the end of the war. The German newsreels in French take full advantage of the disastrous Allied assault.
À l'aube du 19 août, des troupes anglaises, américaines et canadiennes tentent de prendre pied sur la plage de Dieppe. La radio britannique devait déclarer le lendemain « Nos troupes furent reçues par un véritable rideau de feu ». Il ne fut pas possible aux assaillants de réduire au silence la défense allemande et les conséquences de cet échec se firent sentir pendant toute la durée des opérations. Et maintenant, près de 16 heures, la tentative a totalement échoué. Les Anglais ont rembarqué, laissant plus de 3500 morts, prisonniers ou blessés. La bataille est terminée. La tentative du 19 août confirme l'opinion de ceux qui, en toute objectivité, considèrent que depuis Hendaye jusqu'à l'océan glacial, des troupes débarquées ne peuvent ni s'établir ni se maintenir.
The Germans claimed 2 victories, on the beach at Dieppe and in the public opinion, which now believes that Fortress Europe is impenetrable. Two years later, the failure at Dieppe leads Eisenhower and his allies to abandon their plans to take this major port on the Atlantic coast, which would be heavily defended. This raises the question of transporting tanks and heavy equipment by large ships that cannot approach the beaches without running aground. Eisenhower builds 2 prefabricated artificial harbors, one for the Americans and the other for the British. This colossal project and technological feat is known as Mulberry Harbors. These quays and floating piers will be towed across the English Channel and submerged on D-Day in front of the landing beaches, with massive concrete cubes to protect them from the waves. The construction site is spotted by a German reconnaissance plane, but the High Command doesn't understand what it is. D-Day landing preparations in southern England have become history's most significant accumulation of troops and equipment, impossible to hide from the Germans. So the Allies invent a new disinformation maneuver, Operation Fortitude, which consists of 2 fake operations planned for the first 6 months of 1944. Fortitude North, the announcement of a landing in Norway, so the Germans will send troops there, creating short supply elsewhere. And Fortitude South, to convince Hitler that the main landing will occur in the Pas de Calais, where the distance between England and France is at its shortest. General Patton is reinstated because he's famous and credible, leading a phantom army with dummy armored divisions. But will Hitler fall for it? In March 1944, he leaves his headquarters in the east for his mountain home. He's taken the bait of Operation Fortitude. He orders the transfer of troops to Norway and the reinforcement of the armored divisions in the Pas-de-Calais. At the Berghof, his chalet, now the hub of power, Hitler reassures his much-needed Romanian, Bulgarian, and Slovakian allies. Although he believes the D-Day landings will occur in Pas-de-Calais, he can't be sure. He has no choice but to keep fortifying the coasts of occupied Europe. From Lapland to the Basque Country, he reinforces a channel zone, which greatly benefits French cement and construction companies. In the spring of 1944, along the length of what is now known as the Atlantic Wall, 9,000 blockhouses are completed, representing only half the amount initially planned. This is because Hitler prioritizes gigantic submarine shelters in French ports, such as Lorient and Saint-Nazaire. He states, with walls 15 feet thick and 600 feet long, they will be invulnerable and indestructible. Hitler's vision of defense is medieval. He wants walls. He says, I will go down in history as the greatest fortification builder of all time. I am hell-bent on turning the Atlantic and English coasts into an impregnable fortress. German newsreels go wild to impress the Allies.
So bringen sich Briten und Amerikaner in Invasionsstimmung.
Every family has at least one member dead, wounded, or taken prisoner. At the National Socialist People's Relief, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels puts on a show of concern for the Germans living in ruins. And on the Atlantic Wall, the Führer appoints notorious leaders. At the helm of the Western Front is Field Marshal von Rundstedt, one of France's conquerors. And highly popular Field Marshal Rommel is placed at the head of all coastal defenses. His presence alone reassures the Reich's film audiences as he addresses them, as seen here in Le Touquet in the spring of 1944. Given our fortification, the iron morale of our troops, and our new weapons, we can rest easy. There's no need to worry, we'll be fine. If the English try to land here, they won't come back again. Yet Rommel knows that some sectors are less well defended than others. Many of Rommel's 4,000 weapons are spoils of war in France in 1940, including the famous 75mm cannon or railroad artillery. The calibers are too varied, and shell stocks are insufficient. The manpower was insufficient as well. 235,000 Wehrmacht soldiers are spread out along the Atlantic Wall. Around 30,000 are in Normandy. And they're not all Germans. Some units were taken from Russian prison camps. generally sentenced to starve to death. The most recently captured prisoners still fit to fight are fed, washed, and given German uniforms. In Hitler's view, they should receive a political education like all the Reich soldiers. The instructors are given a booklet whose title copies that of an American film, Why We Fight. During their training, the recruits memorize the following words. England feels it's her duty to rule over other peoples. Americans believe in the United States supremacy over other peoples. Jews are the world's main war makers. For Hitler, this indoctrination has military value. Celebrating his rise to power at a Munich brewery, he says, "If a man believes his command is infallible, he dies more easily. Let's uphold this belief and ensure that his final fight is easier for him." Hitler wants the defenders of the Atlantic Wall to be indoctrinated, trained, and able to withstand the first hit. But many of the recruits from Germany are skinny children who have endured restrictions, sleep deprivation, Allied bombings in their towns, and the brutality of the Nazi education. Like 18-year-old soldier Franz Gockel, lost in his oversized uniform and helmet. He stands with his machine gun on the beach at Colville-sur-Mer, where the Americans will soon land. Gockel writes, "The beach is well defended. At low tide, a long strip of anti-tank obstacles stretches across the sand in front of Colville. Death waits on the steel gantries and tree trunks with flat mines on top that should tear apart the ships landing at high tide. 6 million mines under the sea, under the sand, and in the fields above the cliffs." But Rommel believes this is not enough. He is equally concerned about the air defense of the Atlantic Wall. He has plenty of pilots and outstanding aircraft, but his squadrons are scattered all over France. Rommel also regrets that he cannot command the tanks Hitler has reserved in the Pas-de-Calais. Field Marshal von Rundstedt privately tells Rommel, "The Atlantic Wall is a two-bit bluff." Rommel agrees. He says, "This charade is more for the German public than for the enemy. Who knows the Atlantic Wall better than we do?" One of the Allies' unwitting sources of information is General Oshima, ambassador of Japan, Germany's main ally. Invited to visit the Atlantic Wall for 4 days, he transmitted a 20-page double-encoded report to Tokyo, which was intercepted and deciphered by brilliant American academics. This report gave a detailed account of the structure of the fortifications, artillery, and communications. Everything was shown and explained to him in detail. Throughout the war, Oshima will send out 1,475 secret dispatches. General Marshall, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Army, comments sarcastically, "Oshima has been our greatest informant on Hitler's intentions." The wall is closely guarded, yet the French resistant networks find daredevils to approach it. Like Normandy's cycling champion, Guillaume Mercadet. He has obtained permission from the Germans to train along the coast. Every day, he observes the state of new construction work. Minefield installations and ammunition stocks amongst bourgeois villas and luxury hotels emptied of their guests. This takes courage in a country that generally remains loyal to its head of state, Marshal Pétain, who continues to collaborate with the Germans. Resistance fighters represent barely 2% of the population, but they bring essential information to the Allies. They reveal that the wall has vulnerabilities, passageways for daily exercise, for sailing enthusiasts, for those who are homesick. The Germans are sick and tired of staring in vain at the waves on the horizon. Some slowly lose their fighting spirit, like Helmut Lichtenfeld's. He writes, "I'm doing quite well. Normandy, the name of this part of France, is a wealthy region. We eat lots of meat. We're well fed. But the resistance fighters are sharpening their knives. They will show no mercy. The Maquisards, up to 100,000, are hiding in the forests and mountains of Vercors, Limousin, Provence, and Normandy. They're learning how to wage war, waiting for the insurrection order. This order will be transmitted by London's radio station, the BBC, always jammed by the Germans. But the jamming doesn't stop people from listening to General de Gaulle, the voice of hope, or the program Les Français parlent au Français, which broadcasts curious personal messages, coded orders for the resistance fighters. Messages such as "Les dés sont sur le tapis," the dice are on the carpet, which 48 hours before D-Day will trigger the sabotage of the railroads. The order for cutting telephone lines is "Il fait chaud à Suez," it's hot in Suez, repeated twice. Resistance fighters or not, the French await the announcement of D-Day. It will be broadcast 4 days prior and will be a verse by Verlaine, the long sobs of violins of autumn, and on D-Day by another verse, wound my heart with a monotonous languor. The Germans are well aware of these messages. Rommel knows that one of them will announce D-Day. There's nothing to do but wait. Rommel tells his officers, "Everything will be decided on the beaches the very first day, like in Dieppe. We'll have to push them back immediately. It will be the longest day." Opposite him, Eisenhower. In the spring of 1944, he organizes a summit meeting to allocate landing sectors and give the beaches code names. These names are to be chosen at random and kept secret. 2 American non-commissioned officers helping with the maps give the names of their states and hometowns. This is how the 2 westernmost beaches assigned to the Americans come to be called Utah and Omaha. Utah Beach is at Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. Omaha Beach is at Colville-sur-Mer. Montgomery suggests to Churchill using fish names for the 2 British beaches: Goldfish and Swordfish. Churchill remarks that these fish names aren't appropriate when so many men will die in the sea. So the ending fish is removed. The 2 English beaches, Arromanches and Ouistreham, become respectively Gold and Sword. French commandos will land there. Between the 2, the beach at Courcelles-sur-Mer, intended for the Canadians, is christened Juno, after an officer's wife. To secure these beaches and the Allied flanks, American paratroopers will jump to the west, and British paratroopers to the east on the Orne Canal. Eisenhower sends his car for Churchill to have him meet the paratroopers. At the wheel is his driver of 2 years, 26-year-old Kay Summersby. Eisenhower says, "When I first saw her, I thought I was dreaming." She is a war hero who drove an ambulance through London in flames. Over the course of 2 years, their relationship has become more intimate. American and British paratroopers pull off a spectacular rehearsal for Churchill and Eisenhower. Churchill expresses his satisfaction and confidence. He says to Eisenhower, "General, if you could liberate Paris before winter, it would be the greatest victory of modern times." Eisenhower and Montgomery finally agree to organize a large-scale rehearsal for the Normandy landings. Exercise Tiger involves 30,000 American and British troops. On April 22nd, 1944, they launch an 8-day assault on 2 beaches in southern England, similar to those in Normandy. They are about to experience a nightmare that will remain a secret for half a century. Disorganized command, artificial fog, and instructors firing live ammunition result in hundreds of dead and wounded. But the worst is yet to come. During the first days of the exercise, the radio operators struggle with their equipment while in action. And when it works, everyone chatters non-stop. On the other side of the channel, the Germans detect unusual radio traffic. Admiral Dönitz, the German Navy's cunning commander, immediately gives the order to fight. 9 torpedo boats take off. Hitler's great battleships have all been sunk by the Royal Navy. But these fearsome, fast, agile, and well-armed crafts are still operational and ideally suited to brutal interventions in the English Channel. They intercept the landing barges packed with hundreds of soldiers, and then the unthinkable occurs. In addition to the beach casualties, several hundred men are drowned and missing. Among them, 10 officers carrying plans for the real beaches of Utah and Omaha. Eisenhower is furious and considers aborting Operation Overlord altogether if the maps are not found. a long, gruesome fishing expedition is organized. All 10 maps are recovered. D-Day will take place as planned. This disaster is immediately shrouded in secrecy until 1984. British and American troops are taken to special camps close to the coast. They have no contact with the outside world. Everyone senses that D-Day is near and that the countdown has begun. On May 18, 1944, Eisenhower comes to encourage his men, who are perfecting their training and receiving new weapons. One of these is the famous bazooka, a tubular rocket launcher that can pierce tank armor and the cement walls of blockhouses. But also a much older piece of equipment, a tragic souvenir of World War I, the gas mask. A test of the mask, very close to D-Day, takes place on May 21st, 1944, as identified by clapboard. This test is awkwardly completed with a gas chamber drill. This is all it takes to scare these men, already nerve-wracked by the long wait. May 27th, they try to relax by listening to Glenn Miller's orchestra at full blast. And jazz music broadcast by Radio Berlin, with commentary by an American host who's gone over to the enemy, Mildred Gillers.
Hello, darling. This is Pete calling the American Expeditionary Force. Four corners of the world, I'd willingly sacrifice 1 million American boys and fall on battlefields.
She also says, "You're waiting for the starting signal, imagining you will succeed in invading our great continent. You're going to attack a huge fortress. You're going to get slaughtered." May 28th, the distribution of French money, an invasion currency in the same color as the dollar, which revolts General de Gaulle, who was kept away from the D-Day landings until the last moment. May 31st, the men collect their survival kit, an indication that the landing is imminent. 3 cans of pressed meat, cheese, vitamin cookies, sugar, cigarettes, matches, chewing gum, a can opener, and a life belt. Eisenhower is confident. His men are pumped up, like these boys from a small town in the South, Bedford, Virginia. Ray writes to his parents, "Operation Tiger made us even more aware of our responsibilities. We tried to be the best during training. It was a matter of pride and honor. And it worked. We've been chosen to be the first to land." There are 34 of them from the A Company, 116th Regiment, 29th Infantry Division. They're called the Bedford Boys. They're waiting for Eisenhower's orders to take Omaha Beach, which will soon become known as Bloody Beach, but they don't know that yet. D-Day is approaching. Allied bombing intensifies. On German torpedo boat bases, the Channel Coast, railroads, locomotives, roads, bridges, and stations. This is the transportation plan, designed to prevent the movement of German reinforcements north of the Loire River. And in the south of France, the same pounding prepares for the Provence landings. Day and night, the British and Americans spare no city. France's apocalypse begins, as does its liberation. On June 1st, tens of thousands of men converge on the boats. Eisenhower writes, "The most favorable combination of moon, tide, and sunrise is June 5th, 6th, and 7th. We will cross the channel at night so that darkness will conceal the importance of our convoys. Our attacks must take place at low tide to destroy beach obstacles before the sea covers them." Eisenhower is then struck by fate, namely rain. A storm is brewing on the English Channel. Eisenhower says, if bad weather sets in, the Nazis won't need anything else to defend the Normandy coast.